What kind of loss would you consider a great loss?
You know, you mentioned all of them, but the loss of a loved one is really the most horrific loss, because that person isn't coming back again if they've died. Now, if they have just gone off with somebody else, you can hope that they may return. But if somebody has passed away, then you have to surrender. And that's what Eckhart Tolle was quoting in his book that I'm just listening to right now, which is A New Earth. And he's quoting St. Paul, which is the peace that defies understanding, the peace beyond understanding, that is actually the purpose of tonight's show. That you can have this horrific loss. You surrender to that loss when there's nothing you can do about it. If someone's died, they've died. And then from that, you can experience great, great peace. And trust me with that.
Thank you, Susan. That's very helpful for me personally. I really appreciate that. And I know that you've been through that kind of loss yourself, Susan, and you also seem to lose everything after your second divorce, and also at other times. Yet,
I'm not very careful. No, I'm kidding.
Yet you have indeed found great peace. Please share with us about this.
You know, people who are refugees from a war-torn country, who have lost everything, and in many cases, lost family members as well. People who have lost body parts because of surgery or war. People who have lost their entire family. You know, I could go on and on. Obviously, I did not go through that. But thank God I did not go through that. But what I went through was, for me, the worst thing that had ever happened to anyone I've ever known, which is that my marriage ended, which was not such a terrible thing, frankly. But the financial devastation of fighting him in court, the decision to leave my home, the realization I needed to go into hiding, even though I had a lifetime restraining order. You know, these are the kinds of things. This is long before the Me Too movement, you know. So this was a realization of letting go of everything, since everything was being pulled away, and also to develop enough skills, which I had to do, in order to survive and also to thrive and make a new life for myself. So that's what we're talking about. You can still have the peace that surpasses understanding, even if you've had to surrender, as I did, to the loss in every major area of my life. I lost it.
Well, you definitely are a survivor. I love that.
Yeah,
and you're sharing with us how to go about that.
Only if you have to. I'd much rather teach you how to not have to be a survivor. You know, how to have everything go your way. That's my first choice.
We want the win-win.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now, what are the secrets to surviving the loss of the beloved, which for many people is the greatest loss that they have ever experienced?
There are a lot of different secrets to it, but the first one is to notice the story you tell. And within a few years, my best friend died, and my former fiance, who I adored, who I worshipped and adored, they both died. And even though my best friend lived in Connecticut, and I was no longer engaged to him, and he lived in New York and Florida, have you, I still experienced just such a profound sense of loss. So Sylvia Brown says, when this happens to you, you just have to hope that you believe in God, and you believe in an afterlife, and you believe that you're going to see them on the other side. So that's Sylvia Brown's approach. For me, because I'm very clairvoyant when I am, not always, they came to me in dreams. So Linnea would come to me in dreams, and you know, in that moment when my dog who died came to me in dreams, or my 2 cats who died came to me, or my grandmother, my grandfather, each of them have visited me many, many times, and individually. And in that moment, it feels like they're still alive. right? You've had that.
Oh, absolutely.
And it feels like and you go, oh my God, they're not actually dead. So I've had that experience many times. Oh, Lani is not really dead. Well, thank God. Oh my God, I have to call her tomorrow, that kind of thing. Then, of course, you wake up and she's gone. But in those moments, you can reconnect. And I will tell you that the greatest of all the tools I've ever developed in myself is this ability to close my eyes, go into a meditative state, and connect with someone who's not there, who I love. You can do this with people who you love who are dead. You can do this with people who you love who are not dead but are far away. It's one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself to learn how to do this, and I can teach you this.
Isn't that wonderful? I love that. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
And I know that the home schedule stressful events describes the greatest losses. Please help us and explain this.
This is a very strange list because these are all the most stressful events. But when I read the list to you, you're going to be very surprised because a lot of them you're going to think don't belong there because they're happy events. But in fact, happy events that are intense can also be very stressful. Number one, the death of a spouse. And when I was going through my divorce, and it was really awful as I've just described, and I used to give workshops, I would say to people, but we all can't be that lucky. So then divorce is number two. Number three, marital separation. 4, imprisonment. 5, death of a close family member. 6, personal injury or illness. Here's a surprise, marriage is number 7. Dismissal from work. 9, another surprise, marital reconciliation. And 10, retirement. So if you've ever had a friend, as I do, who, of course, he doesn't wish for the death of his spouse. He dreads, as you can imagine, divorce. He's doing nothing to create a marital separation, understandable. But he's also doing nothing to create marital reconciliation, which I never understood until I reviewed this list. I just reviewed this in the last couple of days. I haven't seen it in years. So that's something, this gives you information, it gives you data, it gives you an overview. When you have an overview, it's like looking at the world from the top of a big pine tree, very tall pine tree. You see further, you understand more.
Thank you for sharing that. Highly informative.
Exactly.
She does her research on everything,
yes.
believe me. Seriously. So, how many people, I know that many people actually experience pain and loss, and they just tell themselves they'll be stuck with a lonely, long life, and they give up. How do you go about helping these people?
Well, that's a couple of things. So that's a brain chemistry issue, that hopelessness. So if you want to change your life, you have to live in positive expectation and belief, right? So those of you who know I'm doing online dating, so you know what that's like. And I teach this stuff, and a lot of my clients, maybe some of you who are listening, have great relationships and great marriages now. But you know what you had to go through. You had to go through that whole kissing the frog thing. So I have to constantly pull myself up and say, okay, maybe the next one. Why not the next one? Definitely not that one. Why not the next one?
Yes.
Because if you really want a perfect life partner, then that's what you want, your perfect life partner. I'm not taking yours away from you. And you have to do all the things that you need to do to get there. You have to do the work. You have to do the research. You have to say the prayers and do the envisioning. You have to be in your heart, and you have to go online, write your emails, read the emails, talk to people, and meet them. It's a process. There's no way around it.
I'm curious, what about the chemistry?
You only know that when you meet them.
The touch.
Yeah, there's no way, Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane Fonda was saying that with her second husband, when she touched Tom Hayden's hand, she felt an electric shock going all the way up her hand. But here's the thing to know. He was a huge womanizer. So there were tons of other women who were touching Tom Hayden's hand. They were getting the same electric shock. They didn't marry him. So beware.
Well, thank you for the clarity. I need that.
If you've never had that experience, which Gigi and I have each had a couple of times, if you've never had that experience, you want to have it, but don't make up a story about it, please.
Yeah. Really investigate. Do your research.
Right. How many other women this morning had that same experience with him?
Call Susan.
Yeah, really.
Well, okay, help us to understand, when is it too soon to do the work to heal?
The minute the person is diagnosed with a so-called incurable illness, you're living in two parallel universes. One, you're motivating that person to call Howard Wills for some healing sessions, or you're picking them up and flying them to Kauai to see him in person, or something else you believe is the solution. That's just what I believe is the solution. And at the very same time, you have your foot in another boat, and that other boat is, I have to start preparing myself in case this goes sideways. I have to start preparing myself in case this person doesn't do anything to get well, doesn't want to get well, and is ready to check out. And that means you have to master self-empathy. You have to master empathy. You have to master self-expression. Those are all part of my 6-part conversation. You need to be able to be present with someone who's in pain, and eventually you will know someone who's dying. So you need to train yourself, or have me train you, to become present with somebody who's in very bad shape and who's dying. It's essential, because sitting at somebody's bedside is the answer, not just sitting at somebody's graveside.
The acceptance of it all. Thank you, Susan.
And they'll need you,
Yeah.
There are very few of us who have that ability to be present with someone who's in a lot of pain and suffering. It takes a lot of practice, so I want you to start learning that right away.
More muscles to develop. Okay. Now, can we really prepare anyway in advance so we really don't need to suffer at all?
Well, I haven't found that to be true. And I'm somebody who's developed these skills for 40 years, So I haven't found it to be true. I knew that when I broke the engagement with Alexis, I knew that he was on a downward spiral, which is why I did. I knew that he wasn't taking care of himself. I knew that he was making some very poor choices about health. Not anything different from what a lot of left brain people who focus on money and power do, by the way. He wasn't a drug addict. He wasn't doing anything weird like that. But he was just allowing himself to be in enormous stress day after day after day. And he hadn't eliminated the people in his life who triggered him to stress and caused stress. So you have to be completely proactive, and you can't be in denial about anything. So I started to prepare myself. On the one hand, I kept encouraging him to speak to Howard. And on the other hand, I just said, okay, well, this is, I chose not to become his wife, so I don't have power over his decisions. And that was my choice. I didn't see that it was an opportunity for me, so I decided to save myself. Then I had to deal with that. I had to deal with the guilt. And I said, well, I gave him years to wake up, years to get out of denial, years to commit himself to eliminating stress and the potentiality of disease. I got him over 2 huge health crises, when I had dated him much, much earlier. And I said, that's it, that's enough. That's enough for me.
You had to save your heart, protect your heart.
Well, protect yourself. If you say to somebody, I know that you've been diagnosed with something, so you need to get rid of all the people who create stress in your life. Then you go home and you're taking off your makeup and you're looking in the mirror and going, wait a second, don't I need that advice? Don't I need to get rid of all the people who are creating stress in my life? Oh, wasn't that what he was doing? Trying to suck the very lifeblood out of me because he was so desperate and frightened and all that? No. People have to be self-actualizing. They really do. And not just as terminology. You know, they have to really be willing to acquire the skills to be doing that.
A lot of depth involved, no doubt. Well, will I ever look in the mirror the same again?
Who are those people, and who do I have to get rid of today? I know you and I have been very good. We just crossed.
Oh, okay, well, let's explore. During divorce, which is the number 2, and even separation, which is number 3, and more than 50% of all people going through this also lose their home. And so please help us speak about this, how anyone can actually cope with the compound loss.
That's why nobody wants to get a divorce. You know, you give up, in most states, you give up half of your assets. If you don't have a lot of money, then you can't buy your spouse's share of the house out if you own a house. So now you're giving up half of your assets, and you have to sell the house to pay off your spouse. No sane person wants to do that, obviously. You know, this is all torture. Then you give up the things that you did enjoy about your spouse because there are things about your spouse you don't enjoy enough. You know, and I remember when my stepfather left his marriage to marry my mother. You know, my mother's husband had died, so there was no such issue for her. Though she gave up a lifestyle by moving from, you know, Park Avenue to, you know, Connecticut, but still, she adored him, so that wasn't a big decision for her. But, you know, he had to give up so much money. He had to leave the town where he had lived for, you know, 20, 30 years. He had to go through the whole thing potentially with his children, who, thank God, were angels about this. I can't believe they were so wonderful, but they were. I mean, to this day, neither of his daughters blamed my mother or me for 2 seconds. He said that was my father's decision, which is really a rarity in my world. Very, very spiritual women. I was very lucky. And that's just what it is. But my stepfather and my mother fell madly in love with each other, just madly in love with each other. And when my father died, she wanted to remarry, and what are you going to do? So he tried to avoid the inevitable. But inevitably, you know, he was too unhappy without her. So they were together. It's painful to give up stuff, but none of us is leaving here with that stuff. So I trained myself a long time ago, long before that second divorce. I trained myself not to get too attached to it, just to be really attached to keeping my body healthy, my mind healthy, my soul healthy, keeping my chakras as, you know, uncomplicated, clean, you know, as I possibly could. And wherever I go, I'm taking me. So even if I can't take a lot of stuff anymore, I'm taking me.
Oh, that's beautiful.